Have you ever had a dream where you are in a fantasy world fighting amongst some sort of heroes that you've imagined out of nowhere, in particular, maybe from a movie or book or something, and you go and kill this bad guy or, save the day or etc., etc., and you wake up and you forgot all of it? I've been there a million times. Sometimes I think, wow, that's like a really great idea as soon as I woke up. And then by the time I get dressed, I've completely forgotten about it because now I'm already going through the motions of my day. And that's about it. I've also had many moments where I'm staring at my screen or I'm staring at a book, whether I'm writing something or typing something, and I either have writer's block and just can't get past that block in my head, or I have a million ideas coming through my head. I'm stuck in this wanderlust, and 2 hours later, all I did was just stare blankly as I sort of daydreamed. Unfortunately, I don't have an answer to overcome any of that. I think it's just generally speaking, sometimes just kind of stepping away and coming right back, works. And, sometimes just taking little notes here and there is, a couple of things that I know has worked for me, but everybody's a little different. So I can't say I have the one solution that fixes it all, but I'm hoping at the very least that my discussion today and subsequent videos about my campaign and how I've created it and I've ran it and still running it might hopefully give some sort of inspiration. I'm totally cool with you taking some or all the ideas and making it your own or just simply copy and paste. I hope that what I provide is something that helps get your writer block out of that writer's block. Take that hammer and chisel and nail through that writer's block. I was trying to nail through the wall of conflicts that are in your head. I don't know where I was really going with that. But anyway, something to note is that my campaign is a bit more roleplay heavy. A lot of my content, generally when I'm creating an idea and such, I create the idea first, I create the villain, I create the city or whatever first, and then just look into the rules of Pathfinder 2nd Edition and figure out, what helps fit that. If, I imagine somebody can sneak around, then obviously we would be going rogue, but maybe I might go a little bit more into spellcaster or maybe a mix of the two, and try to find something like invisibility, or maybe just find some items or something that sort of helps support that idea. So I could say that those various ideas can be applied to other tabletop RPGs because I do run a couple of other tabletop RPGs, or at least I had in the past. I'm saying that as if I'm doing that actively, but I have ran Mage the Awakening, Edge of the Empire, Pokemon Tabletop United. Enough about me. Let's focus on this campaign stuff. My campaign is called Gentrail, a Trail of Generations. I am taking some content from my prior campaign of Starfinder and making it more focused on one very specific planet that we called Pandemonium. Pandemonium is a planet in Starfinder that was split into 3 different parts. The players never delved into why the planet was split into 3, nor what sort of technology or magic was holding these 3 massive chunks of Earth and was keeping it all in orbit and running efficiently. And this campaign is going to go into sort of the details of that. I had a pretty big answer to come up with, because the obvious question is, how did the planet get split into 3? I first looked through Pathfinder's own lore of things, because this is being a Pathfinder game. Of course, I'm going to take some ideas. This is focused on Pathfinder lore stuff. This is a Pathfinder game at the end of the day. I might not be doing a Galorian thing or whatever, but I am taking creatures and classes and everything else, all the rules part of it. So why not zap a little bit of lore? So I looked through Pathfinder a bit, and I looked through some deities, and I came up with the idea that Shaylin and Lamashtu, those are two deities that I think are great to have a conflict about. That is going to be settled on this planet. What I wanted to do between those two is create this sort of concept that anybody and everybody can be accepted no matter how beautiful or ugly you are. Really decided that Lamashtu is the reason behind why there's an issue between beauty and ugliness and acceptance and not. And I also wanted to sort of paint this picture too about how while Shaylin is very open about accepting anybody and everything and seeing beauty in everyone, her followers may not have that focus. Her followers probably mean well, but the average Shaylin worshiper does highly regard beauty as a thing. Shaylin's trying to spread the word of like how, you know, she's cool with everybody. There's no issue here. But her followers just have this just real stubborn conservative perspective of like, this is the way and that's the only way. And thus, unfortunately, causing people to focus or lean a little bit more towards Lamashtu. So we have a little bit of that conflict going on, right? Also got a couple more, maybe more obvious things. Like that's kind of a bit more of like on the nitty gritty diplomatic religious cultist stuff going on that isn't going to be very obvious right away, unlike a couple of other things that I plan on implementing. One of the things I'd advise doing as a game master is getting with your players to see what they would like. And one of the players really likes Eldritch Horrors, really likes Lovecraftian, so I implemented a king in yellow. Because I made some changes, overall ended up being a queen in yellow, but essentially this is going to be the very first major threat I imagine for the players to pursue. Anyway, the queen in yellow at some point, not in the very beginning of the campaign, but a couple of weeks or so from the campaign, will make an appearance and spread her undead army amongst various nearby towns and civilizations, destroying everything that she possibly can. So we already have this sort of idea of like dealing with a lot of undead, which I felt like was a really good easy level sort of focus of things. Unfortunately, a lot of this content was created before Book of the Dead, because I think Book of the Dead would have been really nice to help add some things. But I did like how Pathfinder did provide a couple of options, like alternatives to skeletons and zombies, so that they all would have a little bit of a unique taste about them. We've got a passive looming thing about Shaylin and Lamashtu. The religious stuff revolved between the two. We've got a little bit of like Queen in Yellow. I've also got one more thing, which is aboleths. That is has always been something that I've always known to be an entity since in the very beginning of my days of joining tabletop RPGs. Back in the day, that's when I played Dungeons & Dragons 3.5, and when Dungeons & Dragons moved on, that's when around the time that Pathfinder came out, and I've just been playing Pathfinder since. So first edition, and then to Starfinder, and then second edition. That being all said, that's an entity. Aboleths are an entity that I've never touched, but had always, or maybe I shouldn't say always, but was something that I thought rather like, hey, this would be kind of cool. I've never really, delved into like an underwater sort of theme, and I'd like to see if I can try to implement this creature. So, Algothus, I suppose I should be saying instead of aboleths. If I'm even saying that right, Algothus? I don't know. But Algothus are, these big fish entities that I guess kind of work like mind flayers, I guess. Illithids, in a way, they kind of have their own little like enslaving thing going on and have their own little, like underground world of, enslaved like humanoids and whatnot, like doing their things. So, and figure that maybe like in the higher levels, maybe tried to implement an invasion of some kind from an aboleth's enslaved army. So, and by that, I mean, some humanoids and dragons. I decided to come up with the idea of implementing a little bit of like Starfinder technology, dealing with a lot of transmutations to see if they can create this sort of massive creature of sorts that can traverse through air, land, water, no problem at all, and be sort of like a vessel for Aboleths to be able to traverse onto land. So overall, the idea is like creating like this creature as a ship, like Starfinder did with some of their ship stuff. Some of those ships were like live creatures, and so I wanted to implement that with the Aboleths using dragons. So we've got that going on, but I'll get more into the details of that when we get to it. But let's go ahead and go to session 0. Session 0 is where we get into the much more controlled idea. It's not explosive. We got some big ideas. Great, that's amazing, right? But what are the players going to do session 0 or session 1? I call session 0 as sort of like a means of like everybody kind of getting together. Typically, I run a session 0 where we just go to each player and get kind of like a basic idea of like, hey, this is who they are, and this is like the maybe 10 minutes before they meet the group, or maybe a couple of days before they meet the group. So honing in a bit more onto session 0, I needed to come up with some things that can get the campaign rolling a little bit. So the players are going to be in West Summer Realm, in a city called Magma City. Looking through the map, I used Incarnate to generate a map. That is a great visual appearance of things, but I could show that I use spreadsheets. I will say this used to be Excel. I've gotten a new computer since and converted things to spreadsheets, which is fine. But whatever sort of source you use, I think Excel is the most efficient way for me, at least, to take notes. I can place notes wherever I'd like, no problem at all. I can just click and drag if I needed to. I could link to like others, areas of the spreadsheet if needed. It just feels like I just have a little more control. For example, location information, and which something about the spreadsheet I really like is I can just very quickly go to like the initiative tab, for example, and I can see, boom, this is the initiative. And as I'm looking at this, that is quite a change from January 11th, 2022 to August 30th, 2022. You can sort of see how long it takes before we actually get into combat sometimes. It's not everything needs to be resolved in violence. Although I'll admit that's not actually true. I think there's been at least 1 or 2 fights in between this. Sometimes I do the initiative on notes and sometimes on here. So, which with the notes, as you can see, it's all a jumbled mess. So to help sort of organize these notes a little bit for visual appeal for you, so you can sort of keep up a little bit, or at least I can get my point across a little bit better. I don't know. I went ahead and used World Anvil. World Anvil, I'm not going to recommend for you to get it or anything. It's just merely a means to allow me to demonstrate my creativity a little bit easier to you, as well as allowing you to visit this campaign anytime you'd like to follow along or take notes for your own campaign or whatnots. So this is so that's the only reason I'm using World Atlas, or Anvil, World Anvil. I don't even know the name of this, but like I said, I use the spreadsheet for my note taking, so don't feel pressured to utilize a tool online. But that being said, online tools are very, very useful. For example, one site I will note is Fantasy Name Generator. Fantasy Name Generator is a great source to get any sort of name you need really quick off the fly. It is something I use all the time when a player wants to talk to a random NPC that I did not prepare for. Because let's be honest, as a game master, no matter how much you prepare, you're going to end up just winging it at the end of the day. There's only so much you can plan for, unless you're the type of game master that railroads party members. But I really wouldn't recommend that. But my recommendation doesn't apply to everybody. I think at the end of the day, as long as you are having fun and as long as all the other players in your group are having fun, you're doing the right thing. The only time there is going to be anything wrong is if somebody's not having fun. And maybe I'll make a video on that later of like what to do with like troublesome players or something like that. I don't know. So let's get right back to the campaign of things. So we've got a city to look into that the players are going to be starting out at, right? So session 0 is going to be focused on West Summer Realm on a city called Magma City, once ruled by a red dragon, the Sephet, a little over 500 years ago. During the Rising Phoenix era. Right now, we are in the last Phoenix era, and these eras are based on Avian City, literally on the other side of the world. Something that I plan on drawing the players to at some point, as that is where the Queen in Yellow is going to be rising from. So at some point, the players won't know Session 0, they need to get there, but they will eventually. I've created the sort of concept that Avian City has a tradition that Saren Ray that Saren Ray's high priest, whoever the high priest is at the time, crowns the new king or queen when somebody passes, or when the prior king or queen passes. When the new king or queen passes, so does the phoenix, and the phoenix turns to provides two sources, a heart and ashes. Both of those need to be combined together in order to rise essentially the same phoenix, and that phoenix will be the companion for the next king or queen of Avian City. There is an individual named Eric Fogarty, who was the last king of Avian City, and used the Phoenix and his power for conquering. He conquered a lot of the adjacent cities nearby, and some adventuring members went and intervened and killed Eric and took the Phoenix Heart with them. So the Phoenix Heart is at Magma City. The ashes are still at Avian City. Avian City's prince, Silas Fogarty, is looking for this heart because Silas believes that he should be the ruler over Avian City. And while I haven't delved into Avian City that much because the players aren't going to start there, at least I've created a conflict that Avian City is in a quasi-rulership perspective of things right now, as we have High Priest Grandor, a dwarf who is technically considered the temporary ruler until a royal member, until a phoenix essentially has chosen the new member. Usually it is somebody of the royal family, but sometimes the phoenix chooses something or someone else, not something else, I suppose, unless we're choosing an object. So session 0, where we have a bit more focus directly towards what the players are going to be doing or interacting with, we have the players focused on Lava Pit Inn. This is a area that they're most likely going to be staying at unless they choose to have residency at Magma City. In this particular case, nobody did, though I did offer that as an option. But we do have one player that at least has a lot of knowledge of Magma City, as well as a lot of the civilizations around the immediate area. In the matter of fact, that same player is visiting Gavin, or at least his funeral, or attending the funeral, I should say. And we have everybody else who is here for various reasons. I had them all just kind of come up with a reason, not to pressure anybody to create a background as a player, but it does help a game master who is willing to implement their moms and dads or troubled lives into the world. The more you give, the more I'm able to implement. But that's just me. That I can't really say every game master has that in mind. Even if a game master does not, implement your story, it does give you a little bit more meat to work with when you're playing your character. You have a little bit more answers to why they are the way they are. A couple of individuals, one of the changes I had to make because of the remaster is a Dromar, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. This Dromar is Harold, who is cook and owner of the Lava Pit Inn. And then we have a couple of bartenders, a Yusoki named Twin Tails, also known as Rat Folk, but going from Starfinder to here, we just call him Yusoki. And we have a human named Claire, who's also a bartender. And then we also have a Tengu named Opal, who is sort of like a busser and like a bartender sort of backup. We've got those names down because those are definitely going to be some individuals that the players will probably be interacting with. I also implemented a couple of individuals, Martin and Timothy, as two named individuals, a human and a halfling, who are investigating the murders that are occurring in Magma City, as there have been two now that have the same issue. There's a little bit of a pattern here with the murders happening at the lava pit and the two individuals having died, having been choked or suffocated. We have a third murder that will happen that night. If anything, session 0 probably ends that way, or session 1 will begin with players waking up to a lot of activity happening at the end, because you got some guards going in and investigating the room in which Margaret had been killed, which is the individual which will be murder number 3. At the same time, I do plan on Harold being arrested and charged for the murders of these 3. So generally speaking, I planned on the players investigating, figured that the players will be asking around, come up with a few context clues, like a couple of tables haven't been knocked over, and there being an obvious plank of wood on the floor that's been ripped out and a hole clearly dug through here. This choker can burrow, so actually, I don't recall if chokers can actually burrow. That might have been something I implemented. It doesn't look like that they can, so I gave the choker the ability to do so. Okay. Something that I do a lot of times as a game master is give creatures changes. It's very, very rare for me to implement a monster as is by the book. That's something I've been doing for years, since the beginning. One of the very first challenges as a game master is overcoming a player's metagame. And while said player, while I admired that the said player really loved monsters and looked at all the bestiaries or monster manuals, since it was on the quasi time of 3.5 into Pathfinder, I admired the love of this player's love for the game, but it did mean that the player did at times take a lot of that knowledge out of game and implement it in game. And it's one of those things that you kind of have to learn over time. And said player did learn over time and to not metagame, but that was sort of one of the first things I had to deal with, right? And to overcome that, I just changed a lot of the stats. First, it came with just changing some of the stats of increasing dex a couple and decreasing strength a little, right? So to make them maybe a little bit more harder to hit, but then they deal less damage, or lower the HP a little bit, or maybe a creature that's not normally good with will saves is suddenly very wise, and just doing little things like that just sort of makes them a little bit more unique than what's on the book. So with the choker in this case, I did give him a burrow. I don't believe I did anything else. So with that being said, actually this was probably one of the most kind of straightforward creatures, but also this was literally the first time everybody's playing Pathfinder 2nd edition. I don't think anybody really got a good sense of what all the creatures could do yet anyway, if they did look into any of the books or the free content online, which is something I have to say I really admire about Pathfinder and Starfinder. It's just all the The people behind it that provide this content freely is amazing. I still get all the books anyway because I love the game enough to want to support them. So anyway, that being said, that's enough about me gushing over Pathfinder. The after doing some investigating, could at least kind of come to a conclusion that there might be a creature involved instead of an actual person. And what I decided to implement a couple of means of being able to figure that out, such as if anybody's really checking the marks, maybe they'll do a medicine check to discern that this, while the choking occurred by someone or something with a large hand, it probably wasn't Harold because the fingers are way too elongated. Or if they were up late at night or something like that, they may know for a fact that Harold wasn't there. They may not know where Harold was, but definitely knows that Harold was not at the inn at the time. Or investigates the hole or the lack thereof, but clearly some loose dirt, I suppose, and to figure out that's a creature burrowed. A couple of things as a note, and I was very open-minded on what the players are going to be doing, but I did at least figure that the creature is going to be really hard to find because it's underground, somewhere's under the city, until the players go to sleep at least. And I figure that night the choker will try to attack the richest player, whichever player has been perceived as the richest. Conveniently, with session 0, we did have a kobold named Kegs who got very lucky with gambling at the end. Had 3 very great successes. It got a critical success the first time and just was doing really well. And actually, said individual was cheating, but the Kegs was smart enough to leave while ahead. So the kobold was going to be my target, but what the players ended up doing, of course, is something I didn't really plan for, is just to find a shovel somewhere and just try to dig through that hole. So I eventually I kind of just decided that the creature is just directly below. I didn't really have in mind on session 0 into session 1 where the creature was, because I just didn't think the players would the mindset would be to just follow, I guess, the trail in a way of looking at it. I just digging a hole. So if I hadn't said it already, as a game master, no matter how much you prepare, you're going to end up winging it at some point. And this was definitely one of those things where I just winged it and decided the creature was 50 feet directly below, and decided that the PCs would have to make athletics checks to dig. And there might be rules on it. I don't know. Actually, to this day, I don't even know. And if there are, great. What I just decided to do is to have characters just do athletics checks, and then followed by fortitude saves to replicate them getting a bit tired from digging. And so they did have shifts, I suppose. After a while, once somebody got tired, then they gave the shovel to somebody else, and they dug. And then eventually they thought ahead and tied a rope to a table leg and dug a little bit further. And all this, by the way, there was, they did get permission from the other individuals that were operating at the lava pit, with the condition that if this does not prove to help Harold's situation whatsoever, the owner of this facility, then they're going to have to pay for the damages. Otherwise, they'll leave it up to Harold to decide what Harold wants to do if the players are successful with getting Harold justice. So they dug through the hole and eventually got to a point where it gave out. Mentioning Kegs happened to be the one. The kobold happened to be the one that was the last one digging when the floor almost gave out, and had them make a reflex save to grab the rope really quick. And Kegs then actually climbed back up. Somebody dropped a torch, I don't remember who, and to kind of light the area, and they couldn't see anybody because the choker was sort of hiding from. I decided the choker was hiding against the wall somewhere, and even though it could burrow, I just figured it was just there was sort of this cautious curiosity. I figured that the choker probably has never had anyone ever chase it down by like digging where it came from, right? And I just in a way, I guess you could say I was given the choker a reason to stick around so the players can deal with the choker. Instead of having the choker just run, because it would have been easier to do that, but I wanted to reward the players a little bit, so I had them work a good couple of hours just to dig. And eventually they encountered the choker, killed it, and got some items. And so from there we then get into the next sessions thereafter. So